Alrighty, we're making good progress today. We are on to chapter 7 of Outlier by Lisa Beeson. And here we go. The next morning, Cam and Ari dragged themselves down to the gym at exactly 5:45 a.m. Kale knocked down the warm-up run to 5 kilometers instead of 8, but it was still exhausting. When they were done running, Kale tossed them their water bottles, and Cam made sure to keep his shirt on this time. Reed called Ari over to where a thick rope hung from the ceiling. "Up the rope, lass!" Her heart sank as she looked up the rope's length to the vaulted ceiling. It had to be at least 15 to 20 feet high. "Can't I just do the bench press like Cam did? Or maybe some squats?" she asked hopefully. "All in good time. But first, the rope," he said, guiding her towards it. "No legs, only arms." She looked at the rope dispiritedly. When she was doing parkour, she used projected physics to get her where she wanted to go efficiently. This was going to be pure upper body strength. From behind her, she could hear Cam hit the mat and Kale telling him to get up. She glanced over her shoulder at them. Cam was grumbling, but he was getting up. Ari turned back to the rope and reached above her head and took hold. The urge to use her legs was hard to overcome, but she pulled herself up, hand over hand. Her arms and back muscles started to burn almost immediately. Maybe if she hadn't just run 3+ miles, she might have gotten further. But she was only able to get about a quarter of the way up before her arms started to shake and refused to move up any higher. She could hear Reed urge her on, but she just couldn't go any further. If she tried, she knew she'd fall. She was about to grab the rope with her thighs and feet before her arms gave out, but Reed swiped at her foot. "Don't you dare," he warned. "I have to. I can't go any higher." "Then climb down, but you're not going to use your legs. Understand?" Ari tried climbing back down, but her hands were sweaty, and the weight was just too much that the rope slid through her grip. Her hands started to burn as she slid all the way down and unceremoniously landed on her butt. "Ow!" she grimaced, collapsing backwards onto the mat and looking at her rope-burned hands. Reed grabbed her under her arms and lifted her to her feet. "You could have at least tried to catch me," she lamented as she rubbed. "You could have at least tried to catch me," she lamented as she rubbed her sore tailbone. "I could have, but I didn't. You need to learn how to fall without landing on your arse," he said with a wink. Ari gave him a rueful look. "Okay, I hate you again." Reed laughed. "Come, let's do those squats you were so eager for earlier." The next day was sparring with Kale again. She fought better than last time, but he was still able to swat her head, making her frustrated and angry. "Control yourself, girlie. You're only making it easier for me to beat you," he said, after a particularly hard smack to the back of her head. "Gah! How do I do that?" she pleaded, stepping back away from him in utter frustration. "Because I won't shut everything out and be an emotional zombie again. I refuse." She started pacing angrily. "And I'm not just going to bury my feelings, because that only leads to ulcers and cancer." Kale folded his arms and stared her down. "I'm not telling you to not have feelings. I'm telling you not to hold on to them. You wallow in your emotions until you're blinded by them. Then they consume you and the people around you." She absolutely hated to admit when Kale was right, but he was. Whenever she let her emotions take over, that's when she affected other people. "So what should I do?" she grudgingly relented. "Don't hold on to your anger. Let it flow like sand through your fingers. Feel it, then let it go. The one who is wise and keeps a cool head is always the victor. Focus on what needs to be done, not on how it makes you feel." He motioned for her to come closer. "If you don't like being hit in the head, then think about what you need to do to prevent it." Ari stepped closer and focused on what she needed to do to fight him. She was focusing so intently that the physics of what she needed to do to best him appeared all mapped out in front of her. But while she was distracted, Kale swatted her on the side of the head. Instead of filling up with frustrated anger, she let it flow through her and blew it out like her mother had taught her to blow out pain. And it was gone. It works. Without hesitating another second, she exploded into action, doing exactly what the physics told her to do. She was able to block and evade every kick and punch he threw at her. She was even able to get a nice kidney punch. But while she was celebrating in her head, he knocked her down. As she looked up at him from the ground, the smallest hint of a smile played at the corners of his mouth before he gained control of himself. Better. Again. That was all the praise she was going to get out of him, but she'd take it. Over the next 3 weeks, the running got easier, even though Kale had bumped it back up to 8 kilometers, and the training had become more intense. Kale set up a punching post with multiple paddles on it that they had to hit 30 times every day to toughen up their hands and forearms. Ari was able to get all the way to the top of the rope now, and she was down to only about 1 head smack per sparring lesson. Faster, Kale urged. It's time you stop fighting like a human. Ari's eyes widened and she glanced over at Reed, who was supervising Cam doing pull-ups on the bar attached to the wall. Kale wasn't exactly talking quietly. Kale smirked. He knows. Ari's eyes widened even more. He knows? I've known him since he was a young man. I trust him with my life, which is more than I can say about you right now. He sifted behind her. Let's see which race's blood flows stronger through your veins. Fight me like an iron, he said into her ear before he swiped her legs. But before she hit the ground, she tapped into her inner energy, making the world slow down. She twisted in the air, regaining her balance. Regaining her balance, and sifted a few feet away, bouncing on the balls of her feet like in a fighting stance. Okay, this is going to be fun. Let's go then, old man, she taunted. Kale grinned at the challenge. All right, Outlier, let's see what you got. They both sifted at the same time, charging at each other like bulls. It didn't even matter that Kale was larger than her and built like a superhero action figure. When Ari was sifting, she was almost as strong as he was, and if she kept herself under control, she could keep it that way. Ari was able to control her body in ways she never could in real time. Her synapses were faster and sharper, letting her think multiple moves ahead of what was actually going on, making her feel like Jackie Chan on speed. As Kale charged her, she jumped up and flipped, landing easily behind him, and she used the momentum to spin around and tried to kick the back of his knees. Before she made contact, he managed to roll out of the way. While he was still on the ground, she rushed forward and tried to put him in a sleeper hold, but he managed to get up and reached behind and grabbed onto the back of her neck and flipped her over his shoulders onto the floor. Before he could do anything else, she jumped back up to her feet like she'd seen people do in kung fu movies and spun back towards him. Quickly ducking around a jump kick, she went for a jab aimed at his solar plexus. But before she made contact, he clutched her arm in a vice-like grip, spun around and flung her across the room like a rag doll. While still in the air, she grabbed onto the rope and swung her body around, launching herself up to the chandelier. While holding onto the chandelier, she swung her legs up, let go, and did a backflip to the ground. Kale wasn't about to let her rest. As she was landing, he ran sideways up the wall and jumped up to pound her into the ground. She somersaulted out of the way just in time. Running over to the weights stacked against the wall, she effortlessly picked up a 20-pound dumbbell and shot-put it towards Kale, who caught it easily. While he was putting it down, she sprinted towards him, priming for a spinning roundhouse kick to his face. Distracted by the dumbbell, her foot met its mark, making him spit blood like a prize fighter. When Cam was done with his set, he dropped down to the floor and wiped the sweat from his face with the inside of his shirt. Then he looked over at Kale and Ari, and his jaw nearly hit the floor. They had started moving so fast they were blurry and hard to focus on. What are they thinking? Cam's eyes nervously shot over to Reed, who was just grinning and shaking his head like it was no big deal to see two people moving around like manic hummingbirds traveling at warp speed. It's good to see he finally found someone who can keep up with him. Cam looked at him in open surprise. Hold on. Cam looked at him in open surprise. You know? Reed smiled over at him. Aye, it's hard not to notice there's something different about a man who can get riddled with bullets and then be totally healed after giving himself a tattoo. I noticed a similar mark on the lass. He turned back to watch Cale and Ari. And then there's the fact that he's barely aged over the past 30 years or so. The fighting started to spread out. Cam and Reed watched as a blur flew across the room. Then the rope moved a bit and the chandelier shivered. How the heck? The ground shook slightly. Then a 20-pound dumbbell shot across the room like a cannonball, stopped just as quickly, and instantly dropped to the floor like it hit an invisible wall. The fighting continued on for about 10 minutes while Cam and Reed tried to follow the action, their heads moving like they were watching an insane ping-pong match. Then the blurry movement suddenly stopped, and Ari was lying on the ground, gasping for breath, weakly making a timeout sign with her hands. I'm done. I feel like I'm going to black out, she panted. She had a red mark around her bicep in the shape of a large hand that Cam could see was going to turn into an ugly bruise. Anger boiled inside him until he saw that Cale's shirt was ripped to shreds and he had a split lip. Reed clapped his hands loudly. Ha! She got him! Good on you, lass! Cale wiped at his mouth and was surprised to see blood on his hand. He tore off the remnants of his tattered shirt and used it to dab at his bleeding lip. Then he tossed it in the trash. Almost every square inch of his arms, back, and torso were covered in scars and blue tattoos. Cam had gotten a glimpse of how the tattoos truly looked when Ari had amped him so much back in Chicago. They'd been all shiny and colorful, and Cale's and Ari's eyes had reminded him of a picture he'd seen of a fire opal, except they were filled with colors he'd never seen before, ones he couldn't even describe. He wished he could see like that all the time. As Cale walked over to Ari, Cam saw he had a huge gnarly scar going through one of the runes on his upper back between the shoulder blades. Goo, that must have hurt. Cale bent over and picked up Ari's limp body like she weighed nothing. Is she all right? Cam asked nervously. Cale turned towards them and adjusted Ari in his arms, and her head leaned against his massive shoulder. She's fine. She just needs some rest. Ari raised her hand slowly and gave Cam a thumbs up. I'm good, she said, smiling weakly with heavy eyelids. I totally kicked his butt. Cam smiled back at her. Yeah, you did. Cale nodded at Reed and then left the gym to take Ari up to her room. Reed squeezed Cam's shoulder. Come, lad. It's time you started working with Tober. Cale wants to put those eyes of yours to good use. Cale put Ari gently down on her bed. Her body felt drained of all energy, and as heavy as lead. They may have only fought for a couple minutes in real time, but in sifting time it felt more like an hour. She noticed that Cale's lip was starting to swell. Sorry about your lip. It was a lucky shot, he said, while taking off her shoes and tossing them into the corner of the room. Luck nothing. I straight up kicked you square in the mouth. But she was too tired to argue, so she let it slide. Go ahead and rest. I'll tell Gemma to have some food ready for you when you awake. You did all right today. Tomorrow we'll start on weapons. Ari nodded, satisfied that she had managed to get 2 compliments from Mr. Grumpy Pants now. When he turned to go, she saw a thick, jagged scar running through a rune that reminded her of the winged sun disk symbol called the Faravara. The ancient Indoranians used it to represent a race of guardian angels. Cale, she called before he left. He stopped in the doorway and turned back to her. That rune on your back, with the scar running through it, what does it mean? She was trying really hard to stay conscious because she wanted to know. His face hardened before he answered. It means nothing now. It's just one more thing that he took from me. With that, he left, and the oblivion of sleep overtook her. That was chapter 7. These are some short chapters here. Ooh, I almost want to go on to chapter 8. I'm going to go on to chapter 8. I'm just going to do it. We're only at 15 minutes, and it also seems to be a fairly short one. Yeah, about the same as what we just did. Alrighty. Chapter 8. When Ari woke up, there was a tray with some covered dishes, a teacup, and a thermos of hot tea waiting for her on the nightstand. She looked at the clock and saw that it was already 1 in the afternoon. Sitting up, she placed the tray on her lap and proceeded to eat and drink everything in record time. As she was taking a quick shower, she noticed the hand-shaped bruise on her arm that was incredibly tender and sore. That will probably take an annoyingly long time to heal. Looks like I'll be wearing long sleeves for a while. After she got dressed, she took the tray of dirty dishes down to the kitchen, which smelled like heaven. Gemma was pulling a sheet of cookies from the oven to add to the dozens on a cooling rack that covered almost every available surface. There was also a beautifully iced birthday cake on the prep table. Cam burst into the kitchen from the mudroom, his face flushed and looking triumphant. "I have found my calling, ladies!" "What are you talking about?" Ari asked as she took the tray to the sink and absently started washing the dishes. "Oh, you didn't hear? Tober's teaching me how to be a badass sniper. All those hours of video games were not in vain. I'm a natural. After he modified the scope for me, I aced target practice with no problem. I was even able to get a rabbit my first time out. Tober's cleaning it now. What a rush." "Wait, Tober is teaching you? The guy who hasn't said a word to us the whole time we've been here?" Ari asked incredulously. Cam came over to the sink and used the dish soap to wash his hands, and then leaned against the counter. "I know! Crazy, right? But once you get past his stony demeanor and the fact that he has absolutely no sense of humor, he's not a bad guy. He even agreed to teach me how to drive," he said excitedly. "Really?" Ari asked skeptically. "Well, I asked him, and he sort of made this ambiguous grunting sound. So I took that as a yes," he said with a grin. Ari chuckled at his optimism, but she really didn't like the idea of sweet, goofy Cam learning how to be a sniper. It didn't sit right with her. How could Kale do this? Cam's just a kid. Cam finally realized what Gemma was doing and took in a big whiff of the delicious baking smells. His eyes widened when he spied the birthday cake, and he eyed it rapturously as he walked over to the prep table. "Ooh, thanks, Gemma. But it's not my birthday for another couple months." He went for a finger swipe of the icing, but Gemma batted his hand away. "Naughty boy, that's not for you. I'm taking this and a few of Jared's favorite treats up to Oxford for his birthday party this weekend," she explained while placing the cookies on a cooling rack by the cake. When she saw Cam and Ari's disappointed faces, she relented. "Don't pout. You two can have the rejects over there," she said, pointing to a pile of slightly burnt and misshapen cookies on the counter by the stove. Their eyes lit up, and both of them scrambled over and started chowing down. Even your rejects are delicious, Gemma. "Thank you," Ari said between bites. They both demolished the pile in minutes. Gemma put a variety of different treats on a plate and wrapped it in cellophane. Would you two do me a favor and take this over to the gatehouse for Connor?" "Sure," Ari said as she took the plate from Gemma, and they both went out through the mudroom door. Ari had finally gotten used to the English weather and didn't need a bunch of layers anymore. The long-sleeve shirt was enough. "So, when is your birthday, Cam?" she asked as they walked towards the front of the manor. "December 25th, he said with a wry grin. "Seriously?" "Yep. Me and the big man share the same birthday." "Wow, talk about stealing your thunder," she commiserated. "It's not so bad. I always had off school on my birthday, and it helped my mom save money on presents," he said with a self-depreciating smirk. We would also always do something special together on my half-birthday in June. Looking back, that was way better than any stupid plastic toy that I just end up breaking and forgetting about anyway. He stuffed his hands into his pockets and looked off into the distance. One of my favorite memories was when I turned 7.5. My mom woke me up super early while it was still dark out. She acted like we were going on some great adventure. She had our backpacks packed with food and stuff, and even had those headband flashlights for us, like splunkers use. We hiked up Mount Major like we were explorers discovering it for the first time. And when we reached the lookout point just as the sun was rising over Lake Winnipesaukee, we sat on the edge of the rocks as they lit up, and it felt like the world was ours. Nothing could touch us up there. It sounds awesome. It was, he said, taking a deep breath and coming back to the present. When they crossed the bridge to the other island, they heard the dog's excited barking coming towards them. It wasn't vicious sounding like the first time, but 4 rambunctious dogs and a plate full of cookies was not a good mix, regardless. Ari held the plate above her head. Cam, distract them, and I'll make a break for the gatehouse. He nodded. Gotcha! Then he quickly looked around on the ground for something to distract the dogs with. He found a decent-sized stick right when the dogs came into sight. He waved it in the air tauntingly. Hey, doggies, look at this. You want it? You want this stick? The dog slowed down and looked at the stick longingly. When he saw that he had their attention, he cocked it back for an epic throw. Then go get it! He yelled as he chucked it towards the garage away from the gatehouse. The dogs eagerly raced after it, except for Dennis, who bounced around excitedly, not exactly sure what was going on. Aw, Dennis, I love you so much, you big stupid mutt, Cam said as he went down to hug him and got attacked by big, wet, slobbery dog kisses. Ari started speed walking towards the gatehouse with the plate still over her head as soon as Cam let go of the stick, knowing it wouldn't be long before one of them came back with it. She walked to the front door and knocked. Who is it? Asked Connor from inside. It's me, Ari. Gemma made some cookies and wanted us to bring you some, she called through the door. Come on in. The door's not locked. She turned the knob and walked in. It was a decent-sized cottage, but it definitely looked like a bachelor pad. She saw Connor sitting at a table in what used to be a sitting room, but was now a showroom for his collection of model ships. There were all kinds of different boats and ships from various time periods. He was currently working on what looked to be a battleship, painting it in exact detail under a magnifying lamp. He painted one more deliberate stroke before looking up at her. Sorry for not getting the door. I'm almost done with this, he apologized. No problem. These models are amazing, she said, looking around curiously. Are you a big fan of nautical transportation? She asked with a playful smile. Not in the least, he answered while still focusing on the battleship. I just needed a hobby that took a lot of time and total concentration. And there just happens to be a fellow that sells model ship kits down in the village. So, yeah, room full of boats, he said, motioning with the end of his paintbrush at all the models, still not looking up. Well, they look good, she tossed out lamely. Connor let out a huff of amusement. Thanks. You can put the biscuits in the kitchen. What? Oh, the cookies, right. Walking down the hall into the kitchen, she saw a school picture on the refrigerator of a young boy with glasses that looked like a mini version of Connor. Arya put the cookies on the counter, and as she walked back down the hallway, she noticed a picture hanging up of Connor and the same boy. Only he was younger, and they were playing a game of chess. The person who took the picture caught an amazing moment of pure elation on the boy's face as he made a big move against Connor. Ari walked back to the model room. Who's the boy in the picture with you, hanging in the hallway? Oh, that's my boy Brendan, he said, glancing up with a proud smile. He is officially the greatest kid in the world. Sorry, but you really didn't stand a chance, he said with a smirk and a wink. Ari laughed and played along. Well, if I had to be beaten out for the official title, at least it was by a chess champion. Connor grinned. It's good you know your place. Where is he, if you don't mind me asking? Connor looked back down at the ship. He lives with his mum in London. She's a big shot lawyer, so when we got divorced, she got everything, and I got dogs and modal boats, he said dispiritedly. But it's all right. I still get to see him on long weekends and around the holidays. Ari regretted bringing it up. Oh, okay. Well, if you're ever in between models and feel like doing something different, I know that Cam is tired of constantly beating me at chess and would love a new opponent, she said, knowing that it wasn't exactly the truth. But Cam had the unique ability of being able to cheer anyone up, or at least be able to distract them with jokes and stories. Connor looked over and nodded. Sure, I might stop by for a game sometime. Cool, she said with a smile. Well, I better get going. Enjoy your cookies, or biscuits, or whatever you call them. They're delicious either way. Connor chuckled and waved his hand. Bye, Ari. Give Gemma my thanks. I will. Bye. Then she went out the door. When she saw Cam, she called him over as she quickly walked towards the bridge. Cam threw the stick one last time, and this time even Dennis went after it. Then Cam loped over and matched her stride. What's the rush, Speed Racer? Ari hooked an arm around his. You don't happen to be a chess master by any chance, do you? Cam looked down at her confused at the random question. No. Do you know how to play chess? She asked hopefully. Nope. Ari took a deep breath. Okay, challenge accepted. After being at Artemir for nearly a month, Gemma had started getting worried about Kale's lack of interest in continuing Ari and Cam's formal education. So she convinced him to get them laptops, and Cam and Ari spent a good chunk of their afternoons in the library, following her stringent homeschool regimen. Ari didn't see the need to hold herself back anymore and aced everything Gemma gave her. After Ari started getting into college-level courses, Gemma gave up and told her she could do whatever she wanted. So Ari decided to help tutor Cam, and when she found out his interest in war strategy, she found ways to incorporate it in all his studies by acting out different battles, emphasizing the scientific, logistical, socio-economic, and psychological principles used to defeat an opponent. And chess would fit in perfectly with that. So between the tutoring sessions, she was also able to make Cam into a decent chess player. Luckily, he took to the game pretty quickly, and it ended up being not half bad. He wasn't able to beat Ari, but Connor didn't need to know that. And that was Chapter 8. That also went very quickly. I guess we can go on to Chapter 9 now. No, I'm kidding. And I think it might be longer. Is it longer or shorter? Oh, it's a very short, but it goes into a different sector. Oh, I think somebody's here. All right, I gotta go. That was Chapter 7 and 8. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day. Peace.